Okay, and thank you to Scott Gross for putting that information together for us today. To wrap up our online pre-hospital training today, we have a very special keynote speaker. Rhonda Kelly is the Executive Director of the All Clear Foundation located in Denver, Colorado. She has served in emergency response for more than 20 years. In 2016, she founded Responder Strong to build better mental health supports for responders and their families. In January 2020, Responder Strong transitioned to its new home with the All Clear Foundation, right before the pandemic began. The All Clear Foundation is committed to providing career and volunteer emergency response communities an easily accessible and navigable system of support tools that improve their life expectancy and well-being from hire through retirement. Today, Rhonda is going to share with us taking care of our own, supporting the human behind the mission. So we would like to welcome Rhonda.
Hi there. Thank you so much, Lisa. I appreciate the kind introduction. And I am so grateful for the invite to be here this morning. So many of you I know are here to hear about the latest in protocols, the latest advances in patient care. And I'm sure all of you dedicate a tremendous amount of time to learning how to take better care of others. And what I'm here to do and what Emergent Care asked me to do is to talk a little bit about how you can take care of yourselves. We know that our culture has traditionally told us to put others first, that we come last, but we're just like these ubiquitous smartphones we carry with us everywhere. Without recharging on a regular basis, we just don't function as well. And it has long-term potential consequences for ourselves. So I'm really grateful to be here. And I think I have a little bit of good news for you. We had allotted a fair amount of time for Q&A. So given that we have a more intimate group here this morning, we might actually be finishing up on this keynote a little bit early. So thanks for joining. I appreciate your attention. The title, of course, Maintaining Sustainability of Public Servants in Turbulent Times, Supporting the Humans Behind the Mission. And I really think that is part of the messaging that we've missed. The populace, our employers, and our coworkers and ourselves have always expected that we can rise to meet these significant challenges of this work with no preparation, just with some innate skill set that, to be honest, none of us were born with, and that we should just be able to suck it up, buttercup, and make it through a career. We've seen more and more through the data and through our own personal experience that isn't the case. We really need to focus on taking care of ourselves so that we're ready to perform at the high level that we expect of ourselves and the community expects of us. And let's see, so give you a little bit of history. As Lisa had mentioned, I started in emergency response work back in 1996, last century. I was an advanced practice EMT working in the Antarctic for the US Antarctic program. Loved it, fantastic time. When I decided at the end of the 4 years there that it was time to get my adult job, I landed in Colorado, which is where the Antarctic program is based, was volunteering for a rural ambulance at the time, while also working as a career EMT for rural Metro. Decided I wanted to be a nurse or a PA while I was shadowing them in the ER to differentiate the two roles. I continued to see firefighter paramedics come in. I just thought, well, that looked like too much fun. So I jumped ship again, became a firefighter paramedic in Aurora, Colorado for 17 years. On the side, I picked up my RN license and was working part-time as an ER and then a psych ER nurse in Denver. A couple of years into my career, I began to really notice changes in myself, changes in my coworkers, and in fact, changes in the ER staff that I was working with. You know, I had this idea at the time that working in the ER was going to improve my delivery of care in the field because I would have a better understanding what we could do in the field to support the subsequent care they gave. And when I got to the ER and got embedded in there, I started to see the exact same signs of what we now call stress injury. I started to see the same challenges, and it makes sense. Not only is that where we take our patients, so it's a very similar patient population, but we find that the healthcare professions, EMS, fire, law enforcement, dispatch, all of those who fall under this broad umbrella of emergency responders, arguably the single greatest exposure over the course of all of our careers is to the intense trauma and suffering of other people. But we're faced with that in the complete absence of any preparation, how to recognize that, how to recognize when we're being impacted, when the human behind our badges, our uniforms, our scrubs, our headsets are really starting to connect with those that we're serving, and we're suffering as a result. The other aspect I see that's been very similar between all of these professions is that our cultures have very traditionally been eat our own. Any admission of mental or emotional impact from the job was met with a resounding response, and I know you all know it. Oh, you must be weak. Maybe this isn't the field for you. Here's your Burger King application. And how damaging is that? What a tremendous barrier. So in 2011, I became the health and safety officer for Aurora Fire. Immediately started pressing our chief saying, hey, we need a peer support team. We need a contracted psychologist who gets it, who understands the job. And we need something better than EAP to meet our needs. Conventional EAPs have never been really good at dealing with the crisis that we tend to bring to them. In their defense, they were never intended to be a crisis tool, but that's all HR or our organizations have really had to give us in the past. Fortunately, that is changing, in large part due to the increase of stresses around COVID, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So anyway, push the chiefs for all of those things, and at the time, they recognized the need, they just didn't prioritize it financially. And I got it. We had other very valid competing priorities. And like most agencies, we didn't have a budget that expanded to accommodate those. That lasted until July 22nd, 2012 at 12:30 in the morning. My deputy chief gave me a call and said, hey, somebody just shot up the movie theater. This is awful. Can you roll out that program you keep talking about? Of course, we couldn't. We hadn't built it yet. So we cobbled together a response, inadequate, but something. And that was the beginning of our peer support. Around the same time, the University of Colorado had moved their medical school into the city of Aurora. And the head of the National Center for Depression at the time, Matt Vogel, reached out to me, said, hey, I really want to work with firefighters. What do you need? Said, well, we need to stop working in isolation. Most of the fire service, they do more EMS than they do fire. And we were suffering as an entire population, this group of emergency responders, that we are siloed not only within our agencies, but within our branches, yet we're facing all the same challenges. We knew in 2011 that suicide was one of our leading occupational killers, but we still weren't doing anything to address it, to get ahead of that stress injury that I mentioned. He thought it sounded like a great idea to work across branch boundaries, to really approach not only our mental health and well-being, but to incorporate our families in it. Many times we know the families wear an invisible uniform. They suffer from our jobs, but they don't necessarily understand that. They don't understand why. So in 2016, we founded Responder Strong. It was born at CU's medical school, CU Anschutz. Matt had created the National Mental Health Innovation Center and had a potential stream of revenue for us. So we formed Responder Strong to work across branch boundaries to improve mental health supports for emergency responders and our families. That program really took off. Originally, we just intended it to cover Colorado. Within a few months, it was pulled nationally, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the reasons why. In 2019, I happened to meet a group that was being formed called All Clear Foundation. It is a 501c3 that focuses more broadly on the overall wellness and longevity of emergency responders. And when we use that term, we are inclusive of frontline medical workers and their families. I really resonated with that. I recognize mental and emotional well-being are integral to how well we're doing overall. And that particularly these days, that's our priority triage need. But I also recognize it's interlinked with everything else, our cardiac and metabolic health, our relational health, our social health. And I was really struck by the breadth of approach that All Clear Foundation was taking. In 2020, Global Medical Response, who is the company that stood up All Clear Foundation is an autonomous public charity, but GMR CEO Randy Owen was very interested not only in promoting the well-being of his personnel, but how GMR could help impact through All Clear Foundation, along with other partners, the overall well-being of responders across the country. In 2020, they invited me to join GMR and to roll Responder Strong into All Clear. Responder Strong still serves as All Clear's mental health initiative. I've been working with GMR to build out health, wellness, and resilience supports for their personnel across the country. In November of 2020, I was invited as the initial executive director left to become the executive director for All Clear. And it's just been a roller coaster since. It's been good. We're gaining a lot of traction nationally. And what we do as an organization, and this is based upon the way that Responder Strong also developed, is that we recognize there is no one organization who can be the solution. These problems didn't develop overnight and they're not going to be solved overnight. That what we really need is strategic partnerships, collaboration, to create easily accessible and navigable systems of wellness solutions for responders, frontline healthcare, and their families. We all know there's a lot out there, and I believe most of us know that it's really challenging to find it, especially if we don't start looking until we're in a time of crisis where we don't have a very broad bandwidth for searching, and Google and Siri are usually not the best helps for us. So what we have done is we've created a series of free resources and solutions available to career and volunteer agencies from hire through retirement. We recognize that once we leave the job doesn't necessarily leave us. And unfortunately, when we look at the suicide statistics that I referred to earlier, we see a spike in about age 30 to 35. We also see another spike around age 65. We know that this is oftentimes due to a separation of service for retirement that wasn't adequately prepared for. And I know from my time in EMS and in fire, there were so many personnel that just thought, hey, when I get to retirement, everything's going to be great. What they didn't recognize is without the right preparation, the sense of identity they had, being a medic, being a flight nurse, being an EMT, and having that ripped away from them before they've had the opportunity to establish another sense of identity can be really damaging. That the busyness of the days, the structure of the schedule, being surrounded by other people who shared in your unique experiences and get things like your awkward sense of humor at times or gallows sense of humor, that the loss of all of these things at the same time, the loss of social status, in those moments when a former responder or retired responder is feeling isolated, that compartment that's been holding all of the trauma and the stressors from the career can start to open up. And those resources aren't necessarily available anymore through the agency. So we definitely don't limit our services to those who are just active duty. We focus on catching those who are coming into our careers so that they understand what a stress injury is and understand it's the most likely injury they're going to sustain over their careers. But we don't leave people when they leave, whether it's through resignation, termination, retirement, our resources are still accessible. All of our stuff can be found at allclearfoundation.org. Let's see. Challenges. When we first founded, we recognized there were a lot of challenges that not only for the individual responders, but for agencies. Some of them, you're not going to be surprised by any of them, but some of them are geographic. We all know that there is a tremendous variety of resource availability, depending on whether you're in an urban agency, a large agency, a small one, a rural, a volunteer, and that there hasn't been equity in the past between those. We recognize there are also financial barriers, not just personal. Responders don't tend to have a lot of expendable income, and they're very reluctant to have to spend it on taking care of their mental health and well-being as a result of the job. Agency budgets, they often don't accommodate this. And we know that nationally it's a challenge. How do you validate preventive programs? It's really hard to show the value of that. It's a very complex situation. The other thing, scheduling and time, overflowing training calendars. We've been hearing this from agencies across the country. We know resilience is important. We don't have expertise in-house. We don't have the budget to bring it in externally. And have you seen our training calendar? There is so much mandated training anymore. And I know all of you are aware of that we don't know where we can wedge it in. The other big challenge we hear is low staffing, and that's just been exacerbated by the exodus out of a lot of our professions over the past 2 years. Mandatory overtime is on the rise. We're having to do more with less, and that unfortunately adds to the stress of our personnel while decreasing their recovery time. So looking at all of this, we recognized at All Clear, if we're going to create effective solutions that are accessible across all these domains, we have to take a couple of different formats. Digital, which we have a lot of digital solutions that are available equally across the country. Train the trainer models. We would love to reach out and touch everybody individually, but we know we can't scale that way. We also know that almost every agency has a wellness champion, somebody who has rapport, credibility, is respected by their peers, and has the network to be a better conduit for this information. Most of these people, though, are doing this in their spare time, whether it's as a peer supporter, a training officer, or other role. And what we want to do is help them not reinvent the wheel. So we've been creating a lot of train the trainer opportunities, accessible free, to empower these people to really reach out, make an impact within their agencies and communities. We also offer a lot of hybrid resources that are a combination of in-person offerings and remote attendance so that personnel can participate from across the country. We're really excited about an event that Emergy Care is hosting at their facility in Erie on July 13th. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So 2022, burnout and compassion fatigue really emerged across all the branches as the leading challenge. And there's been a lot of negative fallout from it. I think we're all pretty familiar that burnout is defined as a state of mental, physical, emotional exhaustion. And I think exhaustion is really the key word. It's caused by excessive and prolonged stress. Frequently, as a result, we feel overwhelmed, drained, unable to meet the constant demands. And oddly enough, as we get more and more stressed, we have less capacity to meet our own basic human needs, to recharge our batteries, like that cell phone analogy. And that's what we've been seeing across the country for the past 2 years. When we talk about basic human needs, they're non-negotiable. We have to meet them. And I think one of the big disservices our culture has done to us is ingrain this sense of martyrdom, that we just have to do it, suck it up, buttercup, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, take care of others. And we've been pushed to the back burner. What we haven't understood in the past is that the more stressed we are, the more burned out, the more fatigued we are, the more susceptible we are to more severe forms of these stress injuries. And those can manifest as anxiety, depression, substance misuse as an attempt to cope, anger. When we're stressed, we're more likely to be more injured. It's just like a physical injury. If you go to the gym and you lift until you pull a muscle, most of us aren't going to keep lifting. We're going to take a break because we've been forced to recover. We're finding that doesn't happen on the job. We get stressed and we try harder, we neglect ourselves more, and we wind up having the greater injury like we would if we'd continued to lift through that strain or that pull. Burnout basically occurs when our cumulative stressors outpace our cumulative self-care. And the interesting thing about that is when we look at the stress injuries that result over the course of a career of stress and trauma, it's very rarely just the single headline grabbing incidents, critical incidents that get us. Those hurt for sure. But more often we see responders suffering from the cumulative impact of those smaller T traumas. How many GSWs you've been on, how many attempted suicides, completed suicides, child abuse cases. Those are the things that accumulate in our stress buckets, drop by drop at a time. The good news about that is that the self-care practices, the resiliency practices, those drain our buckets drop by drop at a time. Even if the resiliency practices we choose seem small on their own when we first look at them, they don't have to be big. They just have to be a pattern, a habit in our behavior. So when we look across public safety now, I mean, we're seeing tons of challenges. Understaffing is huge, especially with the exodus we're seeing out of EMS, healthcare, and law enforcement for all the obvious reasons. Recruiting and retention. A lot of people who might have considered this career in the past, they're not finding it appealing right now. We're finding that a lot of people we're trying to recruit are asking questions that we didn't ask traditionally. We didn't ask when we came on, like, what about work-life balance? How is this going to make me a better person? How do I know you really care about me as an individual, as a human, as an employee? Those are things we didn't even really think about 20, 30 years ago. We've seen other challenges, not only among our line personnel, but among our administrative support personnel also. Working from home, making that transition, then having to transition back to the office, the variation in COVID restrictions on how many people can congregate, whether or not we're wearing masks. Administrative personnel, we're hearing talking about, wow, during the past 2 years, we've been expected to do back-to-back meetings because they're all remote format like this. And now as we're transitioning back to hybrid or to full-time in person, the expectation's still there for this pace and we can't maintain it. I talked a little bit about basic human needs, and those are the things that all of us need to thrive and to be healthy. Interestingly, security is one of those basic human needs. Maslow's hierarchy, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, is one of the representations of that. And there's plenty more out there. we have a need for security. We can't really take care of ourselves. We can't really progress and grow unless we're in an environment we feel is secure. And when you look at it nationally and globally, no, we are in very, very novel times, very destabilized times. So insecurity, even though we might not be consciously aware of it, is definitely gnawing at all of us. Instability, socially, financially, like I said, again, nationally and globally, things are pretty volatile right now. We look at the gun violence across the country. We look at the financial unrest, which leads us into inflation. A lot of us are watching 401ks or retirement accounts decrease. We are seeing the cost of housing, of food, of fuel, of necessities going up. It just contributes to the insecurity. What we find as we're grappling with all these things, whether it's in our conscious or our subconscious mind, we are trying to deal with this increased complexity around us with a very decreased cognitive capacity because there's so much going on. We are multitasking to a greater extent even than we used to in these professions. We'll talk a little bit about the stress response and what that does to our cognitive capacity. The other big thing we're seeing is existential concerns, especially among those who are so exhausted, so fatigued, so burned out that they are debating leaving the profession. Things like meaning. Does my work have any meaning anymore if people don't appreciate it? If people don't even believe that I'm combating a virus that exists, that people who question my purpose and my motivation, security. There's just so much wrapped up into this, but what we see with the existential concerns is kind of the security with who our people are as themselves. Most of the people who are drawn to this work, if you ask them why they do it, why they sacrifice so much, the answer will invariably be some version of to help other people. And that really triggers an existential crisis when we start to question internally, am I really making a difference? And a lot of the research out there shows if you want to decrease morale personally or within an agency, the fastest way to do it is to teach people that their efforts don't make any difference, that it's futile. No matter what they do, it doesn't change the outcome. And we're seeing so much of that, whether it's in regards to media coverage, to trying to stem the flow of the gun violence and the critical incidents, or to make a difference in the lives of those that we're serving. All of this contributes to our overall levels of stress. And it's interesting. I know all of us are familiar with the term, but most of us, probably because we're stressed, haven't had a great deal of time to think about it and what it really is. The interesting thing is stress, the stress response is hardwired into our nervous system. And I know this audience understands that more than most. It's our body's response to a threat or a perceived threat or a challenge. And those last two are really, really interesting. So our nervous system was designed to protect us in times of immediate threat and hazard, usually life-threatening. What we find in modern life is that our nervous systems still respond with that full-on dump of stress hormones, the norepi, the epi, cortisol, to anything we perceive as a threat. And that can be a lot of things. It can be that we're fatigued and we're more hypervigilant. So we're responding with a heightened response to stimuli in the past that wouldn't have bothered us. Perceived threat also means stories, things we're telling ourselves in our mind. I'm sure all of us have had this experience where you get into an argument with somebody, it's pretty intense, you get away from it, you calm down, and then you try to tell somebody else about it. And you find in the retelling of the event that your hands are clenching, you're starting to get sweaty, your heart rate is up. You are suffering a physiologic stress response. And it's not because you're back in that argument. It's not because there's a stressor in your immediate external environment. It's because of what's going on in our minds. It's we're retelling the story. And so many times in the emergency response world, we find that we get into ruminating what we could have done better on a call, replaying the call in our minds, replaying the argument when we are questioned, whether by a field instructor or somebody doing QA, QI, feeling that intense reaction and replaying that. We can really send our stress systems into overdrive beyond what's necessitated by our external environment. The other interesting thing is that stress is the body's reaction to a challenge. I'm sure many of you have seen some of the research out there. There's a lot of TED Talks on it about the stress reaction also prepares us for a physical challenge, and that there is a great deal of power in our thoughts, whether or not we think I'm stressed, I'm anxious, or I think I'm ready to go, I'm charged up for this event. So if we're at, say, the starting line of a sprint, we're getting the exact same stress reactions we are when we are telling ourselves a story or we're in a threatening situation, but we tell ourselves a different story about why we're feeling that and what it's going to do. It's beneficial to us. So stress itself, it isn't always bad. It can be motivating, and it's actually necessary. If we're at a low level of emotional arousal, like you see on this U curve at the bottom, we're not going to perform well, whether it's in athletics, it's on a call, it's anything that means something to us. But what we want to do is match our stress response to the demands that are presenting to us at the time. I mentioned the body's designed for acute stress, but most of what we experience today is chronic stress. If you look at these two photos, in our mental health curriculum where we teach the stress continuum model in greater detail, we ask everybody, which one of these two animals is experiencing a stress reaction? And of course, it's a trick question. The answer is both of them. And this is what the stress reaction is designed for. In a few minutes, they're both going to be back to baseline, one way or the other. Our hormone, this tremendous biochemical dump we get in our body, is designed to save us, to fight, to flee, or in some cases to freeze. But in modern life, every little thing can activate this. Road rage, getting stuck in traffic, a patient screaming at us on a call, the tones going off for a pediatric cardiac arrest. Our systems get hyped. And over the course of a shift, there's a tremendous amount of research that shows we very seldom have time to recover from those. So we start at our baseline and just keep ramping up over the course of the shift without really understanding the toll it's taking on our body to be sitting in the stew of hormones. And for dispatchers in particular, we find, for all of us in the field, medics, EMTs, flight crews, firefighters, law enforcement, etc., we can do physical things. We can engage to burn through these stress hormones or take the edge off them. Dispatch population really can't. It's a sedentary role. They respond to a call, pick up the phone, get a lot of auditory exposure. They feel that the only way they can engage, because it is the only way they can engage, is verbally. They can't take physical action, but they're sitting in the exact same stew of stress hormones that we are. They go through the event many times not getting closure. The call ends, another call comes in. It might be something just as critical, or it might be some nonsense, a neighbor complaining about someone's dog, and they still have to respond to that. And continually experiencing that transition over the course of a shift can really lead to long-term consequences, particularly in that population who can't get rid of the hormones the way that we have an opportunity to in the field. One of the best analogies for what we experience in EMS profession is the boiling frog syndrome. Many of you may have heard of it before. If you take a frog and you throw it into a pot of boiling water, frog will jump out immediately. It recognizes, whoa, thermal stress, not a compatible environment, not friendly for me. I'm going to get out of here. But if you take that same frog, and I really hope this is a thought experiment, but put it in a pot of cold water, then place that cold water on a stove and turn it up so it slowly heats over time, that frog will actually stay in and boil to death because it doesn't realize the insidious nature, the thermal stress increasing around it, because it habituates to it as it slowly rises. And this is just a tremendous analogy for where we're at with chronic stress. It doesn't hit us like a sledgehammer. It's insidious. It comes and drops and drops and drops over time. And we don't really realize how stressed we are until we're able to pull ourselves out of that situation. And increasingly in the modern situation where staffing levels necessitate additional overtime, sometimes mandatory overtime, financial reasons can necessitate a second job. We usually choose second jobs in the same field, increasing our exposure, decreasing our recovery. We don't necessarily recognize how stressed we're getting. Many of those around us do because it's impacting our behavior. And we'll talk a little bit about that, but we ourselves don't necessarily recognize it. One of the things the stress reaction does, and this is by design, it's to help us survive, is it cuts off or minimizes systems in the body that are energy demanding, but aren't immediately necessary for our survival. One of the big things that's impacted is our brain. The prefrontal cortex, this area up here, the newest part of our brain, that's the part that's designed to use logic, use reason, have empathy and compassion, see consequences for our action. That area is very energy demanding. So in a stress reaction, the prefrontal cortex becomes less active, and a lower level of the brain, the limbic system, becomes more active. This is by design. The limbic system is the emotional. It's incredibly responsive. It doesn't hear a shot or a sound and then wonder and think like the prefrontal cortex was. That was a loud bang. What was that? Was it a gun? Because at that point, it's too late. The limbic system is designed, loud noise, boom, react, take a defensive posture, which is great for acute stress and for protecting us in the moment. But when we live here chronically, it decreases our capacity for empathy and compassion, for logic and reason. We fly off the handle. This is where we have angry responses to everything. This is where we don't see or really care about others' perspectives. This is where we react emotionally and we don't really care what the consequences are, even though the consequences are still coming. So this is why we see lots of times in states of chronic stress, we get irritable, we get angry, we isolate, we don't want to socialize, because this area of the brain doesn't allow for that. It's not because we're a bad person. It's not because our character's changing. It's not because we don't care about the people around us. We're just in a limited state due to that chronic stress. Some of the other interesting systems that chronic stress impacts, our immune system. In acute stress, the immune system goes up, but in chronic stress, it really plummets. It becomes way less active. Because in the stress response, a bacteria or a virus isn't likely to be what kills us. It's whatever our body is reacting to that it thinks is external to us. Ever had the experience where you've been working like a mad person, you got a vacation coming up, you're really excited, you're pulling some extra shifts, you're trying to get everything done, you finally get to vacation, you relax, and 2 to 3 days in, you get sick? That's the immune system kicking back on. Technically, it's a good thing. But what's happening is your immune system's been suppressed for so long that now when you start to have more parasympathetic dominance rather than sympathetic, your immune system's kicking back on and looking around and thinking, oh my gosh, where did all this clutter come from? So it kicks in to clean things up. Another big system that is impacted is the inflammatory system. In chronic stress, inflammation increases. And all of us, especially as medical professionals, know that inflammation is the underlayment for most of the modern diseases out there. Most of what gets us can't survive unless our body's in a high inflammation state. That's another big thing that evolves out of chronic stress. The last big system that's really impacted is our digestive. The stress response shuts down activity in the GI tract because it's not needed for the immediate fight or fleeing or whatever response we're having to this stressor. In chronic stress, our digestion really drops off. And think about it, in our population, what's the incidence of reflux, of IBS, of other digestive issues, ulcers? This is believed to be implicated with that chronic stress reaction that's unmitigated. The good news is awareness is the first step to recovery. These aren't things we can't prevent. We just have to understand them so we take the right actions. So prolonged stress, it's not just in our heads. It really impacts our body overall. It's biochemical. It's regulated by our nervous system. The good news is we can control it if we know the right things to do. And I talked about these things: decreased immune response, to increased inflammation. Oh, the thing I neglected, impaired sugar metabolism. In chronic stress, we don't process sugar the way that we should. This is what leads to the increased incidence of diabetes. I can tell you with the anonymous or de-anonymized data that I've seen nationally, diabetes is on a huge increase across all our branches, especially EMS. And a large part of that is believed due to the chronic stress levels. The way that we process sugar is impaired. We start to develop insulin resistance. That central adiposity, kind of the spare tire we see, unfortunately, and a lot of people who've been in this field for a while, that's believed to be due because the impaired sugar processing. A lot of the sugars that we get, especially high fructose corn syrup, go to our liver. Liver is walloped trying to process all this. The easiest thing for it to do is to transition that sugar, that excess carb, into fat. And when super stressed, the easiest place for the liver to deposit the fat is in the liver itself, which is why in addition to seeing the central adiposity, it's easy to deposit fat in the belly, but within the liver itself, it creates something like cirrhosis, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, that is devastating in the long term. The other aspect, we talked about lower level cognitive functioning. Not only are we not as logical, we're not as quick, we're more fuzzy headed than we typically are, we can really damage our personal relationships, whether it's in the workplace or at home, because we're in that lower brain state, designed to conserve energy, designed to help us in times of stress, not designed for us to function well in life. So I've been talking off and on about stress injury. We borrowed this from the military. I think it's just brilliant. The University of Pennsylvania and the Navy first looked at it and said, hey, you know, we see depression, anxiety, substance misuse, anger problems, suicidality, post-traumatic stress, but in our population, it's not mental illness. And I think this is one of the big things that has really hurt us as a profession, is that the training we've gotten on mental health challenges in the past has been relegated to the extremes, to mental illness, to the onset of bipolar, uncontrolled schizophrenia, people who have psychiatric conditions that are unregulated in the general population. We weren't ever taught in the stress injury model that when we go into this prolonged state of crisis, we can develop these things that are anxiety, are depression, but it's not mental illness. It's not this thing we see in the population. This is an overwhelm of our coping mechanisms. The Department of Homeland Security created this model, which I really like. We have worked really hard through All Clear Foundation to transition away. We don't talk about mental illness because that's not really what we see in our people. We see an overwhelm of our coping mechanisms and the mental, emotional, and physiologic impacts of chronic stress. And it impacts not only our health and well-being, it impacts our performance on the job and as a human. I love this color coding, you know, super easy. We all get the green, yellow, orange, red. The other thing I really like about this is DHS is broken down into the characteristics. Well, what does green look like? What does yellow look like? Then how do you either maintain it if it's green, or how to improve if you're in the other categories? The red zone, that's where we have been so impacted by this stress injury that we need to reach out to professional help, whether it is a counselor, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a medical doctor, but this is where we've really gotten to the stage where we're injured to the point that we need professional intervention. The other states, there are multiple ways for us to re-regulate and bring ourselves back to green. You know, all the basic things, taking better care of ourselves, getting good sleep, hydrating, which is a big challenge, especially in EMS when you don't know when you're going to find the next bathroom. Maintaining positive social connections. But then there's other things. Peer support can really help us, along with chaplaincy, when we're in the yellow zone, when we're in the orange zone. I know they put EAP on here. We kind of look at that more broadly as culturally competent and trauma-informed clinicians, because it is important when we're struggling and we reach out to somebody that they get it. They understand that our dark sense of humor is a coping mechanism, not something to ridicule us for. They understand why we do what we do. They don't make the suggestion, why don't you just quit? They also understand how the job can impact us, how it can impact our families, and how it can put us into this spiraling snowball that's rolling down the slope. So this is a beautiful model, I think, and we've integrated this into one of our biggest programs, the Responder Strong Mental Health Curriculum, and that's the program that EmergiCare is hosting the Train the Trainer for in July. We'll talk about that in a sec, but it covers all of this at much greater depth. We've talked about this a little bit. Stress and trauma tend to accumulate over time. How we prepare for it proactively and how we process it really impacts not only our physical and mental well-being, but it impacts us metabolically. It impacts cardiac disease. That's one of the big things that get emergency responders. And again, the cardiac disease is tied in with high states of inflammation. It also impacts our cancer rates. High rates of inflammation with decreased immune effectiveness contributes to our high rates of cancer. So stress isn't just something in our mind, it is impacting every aspect of our existence. We've talked about a little bit about to increase our capacity to cope, we have to take care of ourselves. We have to charge our batteries or we're just not going to perform the way that we want to. But basic human needs, it can get really hard to remember what they are. And many times we default to what's familiar to us, not necessarily helpful to us. That's what we see with the substance misuse. You know, I don't have time, I don't feel like going for a walk. I don't feel like cooking a good dinner. It's easier to grab a beer. It's easier just to sit by myself than it is to go out and see people. We need to remind ourselves what things really have a positive impact on us longer term. One of the ways that we've worked to do that is to simplify what the basic human needs are. And the way we've done that is to categorize them in 3: succeed, thrive, and matter. And you'll see this represented through our work, including with our You Responder Strong Wellness tool that I'll talk about in a minute, in the resources that we have available. How we loosely define all of these is succeed is academic, occupational, financial, retirement success. Thrive are the things that help us stay healthy. So it's sleep, nutrition, movement. We talk about anxiety, depression, cardiac, metabolic, all the things we traditionally think of as wellness and health. And then matters that existential piece, meaning, purpose, spiritual. I think many of us know, chaplaincy was designed not from a religious perspective, it was designed from a spiritual perspective. A lot of what we see and do in the field can lead to spiritual crisis. One of the things we talk about in the mental health curriculum is the work of Viktor Frankl. He's basically the founder of existentialism. And the main tenet of what he teaches is life doesn't have inherent meaning and purpose. You have to create your own. And when what you do or what you experience, and Frankl spent 5 years in Auschwitz. So this wasn't him sitting in an armchair smoking a cigar and thinking about this. This was tried in a crucible of human experience. He talked about when what you experience, and we see that many times in emergency response, what we see, why did the drunk survive and the family of 4 died? How could somebody have done that to a child? Why does this keep happening? That can really lead us to question our meaning and purpose. And it's not that we were wrong, it's just that we have to reframe it in light of what we've seen. But if we lose meaning and purpose, if we give up on that, we're giving up on hope. We're giving up on one of our basic human needs. And that can lead us down some pretty negative pathways. We see a lot of that as the beginning of the descent down the stress injury continuum, and allows suicidality to develop in a lot of our population. But matter really focuses on that: positive social experiences, identity, meaning, purpose, spiritual well-being. There we go. So I mentioned earlier, one of our big concerns is how do we keep people coming in and how do we keep the people that we have? And basically it comes back to showing that we truly care at a leadership level, at an organizational level, and between ourselves on the line, that we care about the human who's behind the uniform, the desk, the job, the headset, the badge. And we really start to train and focus on the human impacts of the job. Arguably, the 2 greatest strengths any of us bring to these professions is our sense of empathy and compassion. Nobody wants to call 911 and have a sociopath show up. I mean, they want somebody who knows what they're doing, but who also really cares. The positive feedback we get, and I'm sure all of you have gotten it based on the dedication I see in you for attending events like this on a Saturday to improve your care. Most of the positive feedback is something around that. They showed me that they really cared. They really helped me. They were there for me when I needed them. We have to inculcate into our personnel that empathy and compassion are not weaknesses. They're 2 of the greatest strengths we bring to the job, but they're also pathways for injury. When we come in with the objective of helping others and don't acknowledge that many times the hand's already dealt before we get there, we can do what we can, but we can't always change the outcome. If we can't reframe the outcomes to recognize what we did accomplish in an already predetermined set of restrictions, if we don't acknowledge and receive some of the thanks and the gratitude that come from patients and from others. I see this all the time in the profession. that a medic, EMT, flight nurse, pilot will be thanked by somebody and they'll just blow it off, deflect it. Oh, it was no big deal. It was my job. Yeah. That does a disservice not only to the person offering the compliment, but to us too. Because if we're not accepting that gratitude, if we're just deflecting it, we're in effect deflecting some of the recharge of our batteries. It's our failure to, or not our failure, it's our resistance to acknowledging that what we did make a difference. Maybe, most likely, because it didn't make the difference we wanted, but we have to understand we still made a difference. Training stress management, stress injury prevention. That's the reason we created the mental health curriculum. And I'll tell you a little bit about that towards the end of this. Really teaching people, hey, these are normal human reactions. We tell people that after critical incidents, this is a normal reaction, an acute stress reaction. You might be feeling this for 2 weeks. If you're feeling it longer, it might be moving into a more chronic reaction, and that's when you need help. We need to teach people that from the beginning. This is what a stress reaction is. This is how you bring yourself back to baseline. So we're going from yellow back to green rather than letting ourselves devolve into the red zone. Really focus on performance. I said, we don't really talk a lot about mental illness among our profession. We know, yeah, there are some people who do experience onset of bipolar, onset of schizoaffective, but for the most part, the depression, the anxiety, the anger management issues, some of the majority of the disciplinary issues, the interpersonal conflict issues, those can be traced directly back to chronic levels of stress and an increasing stress injury. We really want to talk about performance. This is how you stay healthy on the job. This is how you stay healthy in your personal life. And this is how you not only thrive, but you go on to have a happy life when you decide to leave the profession. One of the big things we're seeing over the past 2 years too is an increasing outreach and level of distress from our leaders. This is kind of in parallel to what we see with peer supporters. As I mentioned, most of us get into the profession to help others. Peer supporters become peer supporters, and many leaders promote because they want to take better care of our own. And this can be an incredibly difficult self-imposed challenge when, with the best intentions, these leaders and peer supporters now see themselves as the rescuers of the rescuers and feel more constrained. Now I really can't talk about my challenges. Now I really can't tell anybody that I'm sad all the time. Now I really can't tell anybody I'm having nightmares. And we're seeing that just reflected in the outreach from peers and from leaders, that they're feeling constrained, that they're no longer able to express their basic human needs and what they need to survive because they're so busy taking care of others. And that's really the messaging we're getting to for all of us is, yeah, we're all here to take care of others and take care of each other, but we have to take care of ourselves first. It's not a strength. It's not a weakness. It's not selfishness. It's a necessary skill for the job. The other thing that we see are families. More and more families are pressuring their responders to leave the profession because they're afraid, rightfully so, because we don't necessarily choose to talk to them. And I think this is one of the things, and I experienced it myself, is I didn't want to bring the details of calls home. Home's a sanctuary. So instead of just omitting the details and talking about how I was feeling and giving a vague context why, I just didn't talk about it. And that's a lot of what we see among responders is they shut down, they won't talk to their families, which increase their family's fear. Many times families feel like they're a second family rather than the first, because while we're reluctant to speak to our family members about the job, we light up when a coworker or a partner calls us and it's a million miles an hour talking about things. They see us sharing emotional intimacy with those people and they see it as being taken from them. So there's a whole lot of ways that we negatively impact our families without understanding it. And what we find is either it can lead to an erosion of the supports we get at home, or it can lead to families increasing the pressure. You have to get out of this job. I don't like the changes. I think it's too dangerous. You're becoming bitter and jaded. Controlling, that's a big one we hear. We are accustomed to coming into scenes and taking charge and taking care of everybody and being listened to. We also think that this subset that we see in the human experience, people don't call us because they're having a good day. We're called to witness the worst days of other people's lives. So we see this badness but in our minds, we expand it to think that's the whole of human experience. We have a negativity focus as humans. As responders, the negativity focus gets really honed. We don't go into a call looking for decoration ideas, looking for things we're grateful for. We go in looking for what happened, what could go wrong, and how do we prevent it. When we don't flip these skill sets off, and these are great skill sets on the job, when we don't flip them off and we go home, lots of times we're bossy, controlling, but we think we're being protective, and we think that our families don't see this whole spectrum. They don't see the danger that's out there. The family thinks that we're so focused on the negative, we don't see the good anymore. So there's a whole lot of things that can arise out of this. To help address that, we do have a lot of content that is designed to reach out to the families. As responders, many of us, we don't have the words, we don't have the concept, we don't have the cognitive capability at the moment to explain this to our families. So this is an outreach where they can come up to speed and understand without us having to do it directly. We've talked a lot about recruitment, retention being concerns, decreased performance under long-term stress, preventing the accumulation of stress and trauma. That's what's running our people into the ground. One of the statistics I saw recently that shocked me is that 126,000 nurses left the profession last year. The communities need us across all levels of the emergency response spectrum, up to and including the hospital staff. This is a long-term serious concern for the communities, and we live in the communities. How do we stem this flood of people out of the professions, and how do we take care of them when they stay in so that they don't pay personally? So I've referenced a lot of the solutions that we've created in All Clear. As I mentioned before, they're all free. We know that agencies don't have the budget to pay for a lot of this, and we don't think that responders should have to pay to equip themselves to really recover from the stressors and traumas of the job and to become more resilient to them. To create a platform that's digitally available to everybody across the country, we created You Responder Strong. It is a browser-based, mobilely optimized platform, which means you always open it in a browser. So Chrome, whatever you use. If you open it on a laptop, it looks and operates like a website. If you open it on your phone, it looks and operates like an app. You can use it without creating an account, but if you create an anonymous account, you're not identified. The account's de-identified from the user. But it allows you to bookmark things that you find. It allows you to perform self-assessments and return to them so you can measure a change off benchmark. It allows you to bookmark resources. It allows you to basically archive all of your experience on it. So in April 2020, the Anschutz Foundation, which is a philanthropic group in Denver, Grit Digital Health, who created the U platform. You may know of Grit. They created many years ago the Man Therapy program, which is hysterically irreverent and very funny. They have a version of it that's out there if you just Google Man Therapy for emergency responders. It was designed to target working age males and suicide awareness and prevention, doing it through humor, and it is funny. That's one of the things I really liked about Grit. The founder of Grit is an alumni of Colorado State University, and after Man Therapy took off, CSU called him and said, "Hey, congrats on Man Therapy, really great program, we're proud of you." He said, "Great." And they said, "We've had 17 suicides on campus in the past 2 years. Can you help us?" So Joe and his group go up to CSU. He said, "Yeah, we'll do some focus groups. We'll figure out how to tailor Man Therapy to you." And they held multiple focus groups. And it was just a little knife in Joe's heart. As he and his team were meeting with college students there, they got the feedback, "Yeah, Man Therapy's funny if you're my dad." And by the way, we don't have mental health problems. So they followed up on that and said, "Well, what sort of challenges do you have?" Social anxiety, fear of adulting, fear of failure, transitioning from home to the adult world, social isolation, loneliness, drinking too much, all the things that Man Therapy addresses, just using different terms, not couching it as mental illness or mental health, more couching it as life experience and performance. So they created this U platform designed to be anonymous, designed to be accessible 24/7. We took it and flavored it with the responder experience. So there's thousands of pieces of vetted content, short and long form written, videos, webinars, podcasts, tons of content specific to the EMS profession, the healthcare profession. a ski patrol, disaster response, wildland firefighters. All of it is designed to speak to the human behind the job, but we know we need to see ourselves in it. And it helps us to understand how the job is played into what we're experiencing personally. So we also have content that's specific to all these branches that guide people in. I had mentioned that it's free. We have more than 25,000 users now. It is available 24/7. Families are also welcome to participate in it. When you log in, there's a whole series of options. Explore is just to explore the content. Self-checks, those are those self-evaluations, not only in Succeed, Thrive, and Matter, to identify, hey, what areas of basic human needs are you really killing it in? And what areas could you use a little more work on? For people who come in with that vague feeling something's wrong, but they don't know why, this can really help identify what's going on. So those are the self-checks that if you create an account, you can re-reference over time. Goal setting, I've been surprised. We've had a lot of positive feedback from focus groups. One of the big things we need as humans is to be decisive, to make decisions in our lives. Ironically, in chronic stress, the decisions have to come from the prefrontal cortex. That's that overwhelm. That's when you come home from a shift and you just can't even, and you get peppered by your well-intentioned spouse. What do you want for dinner? Our typical answer, I don't care. Not the best answer. Granted, we don't have a whole lot of decision-making capacity, but oftentimes what the families hear is, I don't care about you. When we're peppered with, what do you want to do a week from Wednesday? We just don't have that capacity. So I forgot why I went down that path, but anyway, the goal setting, making decisions, sorry. So goal setting can really help us make small decisions over time and show our progress towards it, both of which really feed our sense of self-efficacy and accomplishment. Resources, you can select your state, and brick and mortar resources, which we're continuing to populate in here, become available. You can bookmark content. The last section that people really like is the stories section. These are 30 to 60-second video testimonials of responders, usually answering one of a couple questions. If you had one piece of advice to give to somebody entering the profession, what would it be? What's been your greatest wellness challenge over your career and how did you manage it? And then the one that's occurring more often is, how has the job changed for you in the past 2 years? And what are your thoughts about that? Really interesting stuff, because we're all curious what other responders think. There's also ways to track trending content there. We really promote this as a tool, just like everything else we use. This is a tactical skill. Taking care of ourselves should be the #1 tool in our toolbox. I mentioned Succeed, Thrive, and Matter. It makes it easy to find this content. The other nice thing is this system does have AI in the background. So when a user takes assessments and starts to identify certain topics that they're interested in, the AI helps pull that content to the top of their feed so they just don't drown in thousands of resources. The other big thing that we've done in this is, I'm sure you're all aware because I've done it and I'm sure you have too. How many times have you heard, stop counseling me and give me the tools to fix this? Yeah, it's the responder mindset. We're rescuers, we're fixers. So we have been building out a series of self-coaching modules that are available free through the tool. The first one was a stress management series that talks at length. I believe it's 10 or 11 different modules, several minutes each, that really walk you through everything: sleep, hydration, nutrition. We just launched one on how to maintain high performance in high stress professions. We're working with a nutritionist who's also an amateur bodybuilder whose hobby is focusing on nutrition and hydration for high stress professions, to put out modules specific to that. And we're adding additional modules as the year goes on. So youresponderstrong.org, you can find the tool there. You can also find it on the All Clear Foundation page. Click on the Solutions tab. You'll get a drop-down box. Use is anonymous. It's free. It's confidential. Open to responders, healthcare workers, and their families. Agencies have also been using it. Some agencies have created an account. If they don't have their own internal wellness platform, they're able to pull the content off our platform. It's already structured. They can put it into newsletters. They can put it to in-services, however they choose. And so pretty versatile. I've been talking a little bit about our mental health curriculum. In 2017, we recognized if we really wanted to address that culture piece, that eat our own, we needed to reach out not only from leadership down, which we've been doing, but we needed to get to the people coming into the profession. So we created a 4-hour mental health curriculum, super boring name. I wish we had jazzed it up, but we created it intentionally for the community colleges across Colorado, recognizing, like many states, they train more than half the emergency responders in the state, with a particular presence in the rural communities that don't have their own independent training facilities. And their adjunct instructors are usually current responders. So we thought, here's a great way. We'll get the training in at the right price, which is free. We'll get to people who are coming into the profession to get them to understand a stress injury is the most likely injury, and this is how you protect yourself. And we also get to the adjunct instructors who can take it back to their agencies. The mental health curriculum blew up. It is in almost all the public safety programs and community colleges in Colorado. Colorado Peace Officer Standards and Training adopted it as the minimum mandatory mental health training for law enforcement in Colorado. The University of Denver picked it up and included it in their public safety leadership development program, which focuses on developing leaders in rural, small, and volunteer agencies. We have expanded nationally. We're part of peer support programs. We've been integrated into not only onboarding processes, but a lot of peer support trainings, a lot of in-services, and a lot of family nights. That gives a lot of insights to the families on some of the stress changes that can occur over the career and what to do about them. So what we recognized in 2019, 2020 is that we couldn't just teach this to people. It wouldn't allow us to scale. So we adopted a train the trainer model, recognizing, hey, there are people like you who are the wellness champions and ambassadors in their agencies. We want to empower you not to have to reinvent the wheel, but to use your rapport, your connections, your credibility to really impact those in your community. So the Train the Trainer is always offered free. We never charge an agency or participants. Everybody who attends the one-day workshop is certified to turn around and reteach the content. Participants have access to a shared drive that's updated annually, at least annually. We're doing it more frequently lately. And once they are trained, they can turn around and teach it in their agency, their community. If you get paid to teach it, awesome, we're proud of you. We only ask that you keep our name on it. And yeah, we've really expanded. We have more than 650 trained facilitators across the country now. Emergy Care is hosting an event on July 13th. Again, the participation is hybrid, so you can be there in person or you can be there remotely. I know an all-day Zoom event sounds horrific, and although we're all doing them, but we find there's been a lot of engagement. The chat box is lit up constantly, and it actually kind of becomes a peer support course in its own right. We've seen a big impact not only on people coming into the profession, but all the way up to leaders who are starting to re-see their career in a different light. You know, the divorces, excessive drinking, the anger, things that they just thought were character flaws and beat themselves up about in the past. And now they're starting to see this is a normal reaction to the abnormal experiences we all encounter in the job. So if you go to responderstrong.org/trainer, you can see all of our trainings that are available nationally. And again, really excited about the July event with Emergy Care and grateful for their hosting of it. Respond Online, I've talked a lot about the ways the family are impacted. We worked with a group called the Center for Relationship Education to create a 40-module series called Responding to Your Relationships. It's all evidence-based relationship and communication skills content that is flavored and informed by the responder experience. We talk about that shifting worldview where we see the worst but think it's the entirety. We talk about sense of protectiveness that's perceived as controlling. We talk about parasympathetic nervous system backlash when you come home from a shift just tapped, tired, and wired. Your adrenaline and your norepinephrine are running out, but your cortisol is still running high, and how that impacts relationships. We created those 40 modules. Center for Relationship Education offers a train the trainer model to equip people to take it back to their agencies. But we recognized a better way to disseminate it was to take the core nuggets, the 10 or 15 minutes out of each of the top most popular 10 modules and make them available via video on demand. So the Respond Online are available on All Clear's website. A lot of responders have told us they watched them with their significant others and it helped a lot. It not only focuses on the romantic relationships, the family relationships, but it focuses on communication and relationship maintenance and high stress situations, including on the job, how to engage with challenging patients, how to engage with challenging coworkers. When we talk to leaders, we ask them how many of your disciplinary issues are truly interpersonal conflict at their root. And we get the shrug, like almost all of them. This is designed to help with conflict resolution in an easily understandable way, to identify and understand other people's personality styles and expectations on the fly. Again, more information on how to effectively manage stress, how to build self-worth, growing and maintaining resilience. So great content, again, available free on our site. Feedback we've gotten from it's awesome. 98% of the participants in a pilot last year of 300 people said the information helped them in their personal and their professional life. 94% said that this was a good tool to help support healthy culture change in their organization. 96% said they liked the e-learning platform it's on, and 93% said they see value in providing access to this and similar content. So not just us, the users really like it. I mentioned that Succeed, Thrive, and Matter designation we put around content to make it easier to understand. We have a resource directory of about 1,000 resources on our website. Those are chunked into things that help you with physical health, mental health, spiritual health. We're constantly growing and vetting that database. So again, access is totally free. And the last thing I want to tell you about is we recently received a $2 million grant from Health and Human Services, the HRSA grant. This is designed to reach out to response agencies and healthcare organizations in small, rural, and medically underserved communities. We're looking for agencies that have about 20 or fewer personnel. What we're offering is 3 12-month cohorts of 50-ish agencies each. What we provide them is free You Responder Strong Train the Trainer, the coaching modules, the You Responder Strong tool, but then we expand to one of our partner organizations, the National Emergency Responder and Public Safety Center. They launched the first nationally recognized certification for master's level and above clinicians who want to serve emergency responders. What this 56-hour certification does, and it's accredited by APA, which is huge, teaches master's level and above cultural competency and trauma-informed status. So they're less likely to cry when we come and tell them about the contents of a call or an experience. They understand the organizational hierarchy. They understand the exposures of the job. They understand the impact on the family. They understand the physical challenges, and they're better able to support us when we come to them for assistance. So that clinician certification, the great thing about the master's level is in the past, the only nationally recognized certification has been police and public safety psychologist. Super hard to get. There's only about 74 in the country, and almost all of them do fit for duties and pre-employment screening. So none of us really want to go talk to them, even if they had the time in their schedule. So this is a way to help better educate the clinicians out there who are well-intentioned, want to work with us, but don't know what they don't know. So we've been reaching out to a lot of healthcare insurers, a lot of EAPs, and a lot of independent clinicians to build that pool. The list that we have available so far of NERP certified clinicians is on their website, nerps.org. We also have on our responderstrong.org site a directory of, I want to say it's about 1,200 clinicians right now, divided by state, who are known to do great work with responders. The other thing NERPS does is they created a web-based departmentally focused wellness program. So they've got this huge catalog of material that agencies can contract with them for, up to and including peer support, family, mental health stuff, all that. We're providing that free for the agencies for a year through the HRSA grant. We are also providing for each of these agencies a scholarship to one clinician in their community to get this certification. We want to provide the full spectrum of supports, from awareness and education and outreach and tools to, hey, when you get to the point that you want licensed mental health support, there's somebody in your community who gets it. The other thing we're doing with that is tracking anonymized data through International Public Safety Data Institute to really figure out what works around burnout, what works around recruiting, what works around retention, to create easily accessible dashboards from the anonymized data, but to also put out their policy templates so that when an agency or an organization recognizes we're really struggling with burnout, they can have a policy template there to go, so they don't have to reinvent the wheel. So if you or your agency or neighboring agency is interested in participating in the HRSA grant, it is all anonymous, it is all free. Please reach out to me and I would be happy to talk. There's NERPS's site. I'm Rhonda with an H at allclearfoundation.org. That's my cell. And Thanks for hanging in there. This has been a long talk. We're basically here to support you in your overall well-being. And we are created by responders. We work for responders. And if you have any questions, I'd love to hear them.
We're going to unmute everybody. So if you want to ask a question, I'm going through the process of unmuting.
Lisa, did I miss anything from your perspective?
I don't think so. It was great. You covered a lot. I learned a lot. So
Well, and good. We're really excited that you're hosting the Train the Trainer. There's a ton of really useful embedded content in that. And again, we're just trying to empower the wellness champions locally so that they can turn around and reteach it.
Right. Yeah, and we are excited to have you. We have talked with Angie, who is one of the trainers that will be here in July. So we're very excited. She's very excited. And, you know, we originally thought this is going to be great because we do our academy and we really want to do the Train the Trainer so we can, as you mentioned, start talking about it earlier in the process of being an EMT instead of 20 years down the road, like you said, that we didn't talk about this before. So
and that's a lot of the feedback we get is, I wish I'd had this in my onboarding. I wish somebody had told me this earlier. When I talked about the responding to your relationships content, we taught it to a group of corrections officers, in 2019. We had 43 corrections officers in the room, and one CO came up at lunch. He was probably 60. We were teaching an 8-hour workshop on it. And he just shook his head and said, do you have any idea how much better my life would have been if somebody had taught me these relationship skills early in my career? Oh.
So does anybody have questions for Rhonda? No? Okay.
Everybody's got to be exhausted by now.
Probably. So before we let you all go, and we will finish early, I'm sure, we just want to finish up a few things here. Okay, so we do want to thank Rhonda for being here today because that was just a wealth of information. And I know somebody who just works in the office, I learned a lot and have a better understanding of my peers now as well. So if any of you do have any further questions and want to get in touch with any of the presenters today, their information was all at the end of their presentations, and we have it here for you as well. So please feel free to email them and reach out. I do want to thank our behind the scenes team. Dave Basnak mentioned at the beginning, Karen and Jim. Karen is our Director of Community Development here, and she was instrumental in getting the grant that covered this presentation so that you could have more training. And Karen also has done a lot of the behind the scenes tech work and letting the presenters in and out and informing them. So thank you to Karen. And to Jim Piper, who is our education and training manager here at Emergicare. He has done all of the work to put in the information for continuing education units, and he's going to continue to do all that work to submit your information. So thank you to both of them. Just a few more things before we end the seminar. We do want you to complete the seminar evaluation. That will be very helpful to us. It will be available as a link in the chat for you to answer now. I think Karen is going to be putting that in there. And we will also be providing it as a follow-up to you in the email that you provided to us when you registered. So please complete that. We ask you to do that no later than Tuesday, the 24th. best to do it now while things are fresh in your mind, because once you log off, you're going to want to enjoy the rest of your Saturday, I'm sure.
It's in the chat.
It is in the chat. So your CEUs will appear within 7 days. If you do not see them, you can reach out to Jim and he'll hopefully be able to work through some things with you and make sure that you get those scheduled. If you missed any part of today's presentation, or you found some of this information very valuable and you want to share it with your colleagues, it will be available on EmergiCare's YouTube channel. So feel free to go to YouTube, just search for EmergiCare and you will be able to find that.
Lisa, can I jump in again? Just give me, it probably won't be there until a week from now. So don't look for it this afternoon because it's not going to be there.
Perfect. Okay. We do want to share a few upcoming opportunities from here at EmergiCare. Our next CEU are going to be available through Camping and Con Ed, and that will be June 10th and 11th. If you know any youngsters who have expressed an interest in EMS and are ages 14 through 17, please tell them about Camp EMS that will be held at Allegheny College June 26th through July 1st. We will be doing a Kyle Swain Memorial Walk Run on July 5th. The registration fee for this is $30, and this is held in memory of one of our EMTs who passed away during training in the military. But all of the funds from this event do help students go to Camp EMS and just building that pool of people that we can train. As Rhonda mentioned, the Train the Trainer on Wednesday, July 13th. We are very excited about that. And EmergiCare is hiring, so if you know anybody or you yourself might be a volunteer now and want to do part or full-time paid work, please check out emergicare.org/employment. Everything else that we've mentioned can also be found on our website. So most of that, you just go to the education portion and find all of that information. We thank everybody for attending today's OPT seminar. As we conclude EMS week, we cannot thank you all enough and all of your colleagues for all the work you do in the communities that you serve. We know that, as Rhonda said, especially the past couple of years, it's been extremely difficult. I've been here at EmergiCare for the past year. I've always appreciated EMTs. I appreciate all of you even more now when I see what you do on a day-to-day basis. So thank you for that and have a great rest of the day. That concludes our webinar.